Hi students, in this video we are learning about the Happy Prince. This story is written by Oscar Wilde. Okay, so let us start the story. High above the city, on a tall column, stood the statue of Happy Prince. He was gilded over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes, he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. Okay, students. So one night, what happened? One night, a little swallow bird flew over the city. His friends were gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before. Okay, so he had stayed behind. So he decided to go to Egypt too. So all day he long flew, and he had stayed behind. Then he decided to go to Egypt too. Okay, and he arrived at the city. Where shall I put up? The swallow said. I hope the town has made preparations because it wasn't midnight time. So he saw the statue on the tall column. I will put up here, the swallow cried. It is fine position with plenty of fresh air. So he alighted just between the feet of the Happy Prince students. I have a golden bedroom, he said softly to himself as he looked around and he prepared to go to sleep. But just he was putting his head under his wing, a large drop of water fell on him, students. Okay, so he was so curious and he cried, what a curious thing! Not a single cloud is in the sky, and how it is raining. Okay, and the stars are clear and bright, and how it is raining. So he got quite confused over here. Another then drop of water fell, students. Then again, what is the use of the statue? It cannot keep off the rain. The swallow cried. So he thought that I must look for a chimney pot. So the swallow determined to fly away from the statue. But he had opened his wings, and again the third drop fell. And he looked up and saw off. What did he see? The eyes of Happy Prince were filled with tears, and tears were running down from his golden cheeks. His face was beautiful in the moonlight, students. That just swallow was filled with pity. And the swallow asked, Prince, who are you? The prince answered, I am the Happy Prince. Why are you weeping them? Asked the swallow. The swallow said, I came here because it was midnight time and my friends flew away from that place. Okay, but the swallow said, you have quite drenched me. When was I alive? I had a human heart, the Happy Prince said. I did not know what tears were. I lived in the palace where the sorrow is not allowed to enter. And my courtiers were happy. Okay, they called me Happy Prince because I spent my childhood happily. So I lived and so I died. So likewise, this the Happy Prince talked with the swallow students. And now that the Happy Prince said, I am dead and have me set up here so high that I can see the ugliness and the misery of my city where the Happy Prince lived. And he said, my heart is made up of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep. Okay, students, then what is it not solid gold? Said the swallow to himself. He was too polite to make personal remarks far away and continued the statue in low musical voice. Far away in the little street there is a poor house. One of the windows is open, and through it I can see a woman seated at the table. Her face is thin and worn. She has coarse and red hands, all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. Okay, students, and the seamstress is embroidering on flowers on a satin gown for the loveliest of queens maid of honor to wear at the next court ball. And in the bed, the corner of the room, her little boy is sick. He has a fever and is asking his mother to give him oranges. So, see, students, here the Happy Prince is so kind and generous. So he felt pity for them. The little boy's mother had nothing to give him but the river water, so he is crying. So the prince said, swallow, swallow, little swallow, Will you not bring her the rupee of my swords hilt? My feet are fastened to the pedestal. I cannot move from one place to another. So can you give this to this needy woman? I am fated for in the Egypt, said the swallow. My friends are flying up and down the Nile River and talking to the large lotus flowers. So they will be good to sleep. The prince asked the swallow to stay with him for one night and be his messenger. Okay, and the boy is so thirsty. The mother is so sad, he said, and I don't think I like the boys, answered the swallow. Okay, students, the swallow said, I want to go to Egypt. But the happy prince looked so sad that the swallow was sorry. It was cold here. The swallow said, but at last he agreed to stay with the happy prince for one night and be his messenger, students. Okay, and the happy prince was so happy and he said to swallow, oh swallow, thank you for you. The swallow picked up one of the great ruby from the happy prince's sword and flew away with its beak over the roof of the town. He was passed by the cathedral tower where the white marble angels were sculptured. He was passed by the palace and heard the sound of dancing. So students, there, the beautiful girl come out of the balcony with her lover. I hope my dress will be ready in a time for the street ball, she said. I have ordered flowers to be embroidered on it, but the seamstress are so lazy. They are not doing their work on time. So this swallow passed over the river and saw the lantern hanging on the mast of the ship. At last, he came to the poor woman's house and looked in. The boy was tossing furiously on the bedspread as he was very sick, students. The mother had fallen asleep. She was so tired, but in he hopped and laid the ruby on the table beside the woman's thimble. You see, students, now he flew gently around the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his wings, and the boy said, oh, how cool I feel. I must be getting better now. So he sank into the delicious slumber, students. Okay, and the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him he had done the work which was assigned to him. So it was curious, students, he remarked, but I feel quite warm now. Although it is so cold, that is because I have done a good action, said the prince. Oh, so see, students, now what is happening here? And the little swallow began to think and then fell asleep. Okay, at night. Thinking always made him sleepy. When the day broke, he flew down to the river and had a bath. Okay, students. So tonight I go to Egypt, said the swallow, and he was in high spirits at the prospect. He visited all the monuments and sat a long time on the top of the church steeple. So see, students, now what is happening? When the moon rose, he flew back again to the happy prince, means he had not gone away from that place. Then what he said? Have you any compassion? Have you any commission for Egypt? So he said, I'm just starting. He said, swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Will you stay one night with me longer? I am waited for in Egypt, answered the swallow. Now the prince said, swallow, swallow, little swallow, far away across the city. I see a woman, I see a man in a garage. He is leaning over the desk covered with paper. Okay, students, and in the glass by his side, there is a bunch of withered violets. Okay, students, his hair is brown and crisp, and his lips are red as pomegranate, and has a large dreamy eyes. So see, students, now he is trying to finish a play for the director of the theater, but it is too cold to write anymore for him. So means he is a writer, students, who needs the money. There is no fire in the grate, and the hunger was making faint as he has not eaten enough food. Okay, and I will wait with you one night longer, the swallow said now. Who is really had a good heart now. Really, the swallow is agreed with him. And he asked if he would take another ruby for young playwright. Alas, he said, I have no ruby now, said the prince. My eyes are all I have lived, and they are made of rare sapphires, which were brought from out of India and 1,000 years ago. He ordered the swallow to pluck out of them and take it to the playwright, means the writer. He will sail it to the jeweler and buy firewood and finish his play, he said, students. Okay? Now the swallow said, Dear prince, I cannot do that. He began to weep now. Swallow, swallow, little swallow. Prince said, I command you, so follow my order. So the swallow plucked out the another eye of the prince. Now the prince do not have eyes of sapphire, students. Okay. And swallow flew away to the young man's garret. It was enough to get him, as there was a hole in the roof, students. Okay. Through he was darted and come into the room. The young man was his head buried in his hands, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings. Okay, students. And when he looked up, he found a beautiful sapphire lying withered violets over there. Okay, students. So means the writer becomes so happy by looking at this beautiful sapphire. So he cried, I am beginning to be appreciated. This is from one of the great admirer. Now the writer becomes so happy, and he understood that by selling this sapphire, now he can get some money, and by this money he can complete his needs and he can complete his play. So he becomes happy, students, here. And again the swallow flew away from that place, and he sat on the mast of the large vessel, and the swallow watched the laborers working, the sailors working. I am going to the Egypt, cried swallow, but nobody minded. And when the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince again. So see, students, now how the story takes twist and turn. Okay. Now again the swallow said, Oh, I have come to bid you goodbye. Now I am going from this place. But the little prince said, Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you stay with me one night longer? So the swallow said, But it is the winter season, and the snow will be soon here, so how can I stay with you? In Egypt, the sun is warm, and on the green palm trees, and the crocodiles lie in the mud and look lazily about them. Okay, so in a square below, said the happy prince, there stands a school match girl. Now, students, here is another story of the little match girl. Okay, so she has left her matches fall in the gutter, and they all are spoiled. So see, students, we are learning here 4 stories. The first story which we learned about the seamstress, second story which we learned about the writer, and the third story we are learning about the little girl. Okay, students. So the prince said to the swallow, now little girl's father will beat her if she does not bring home some money. So she is crying. So she has no shoes or stockings, and the little head is also bare. Pluck out the other eye and give it to this girl. The father will not beat her then. Then I will stay with you one night longer, said the swallow. But I cannot pluck out your eye. You would be blind. Already I have plucked out your eye. Okay, if I have plucked out another one, you will be blind. Okay. So see, students, first what did he give? He gave the ruby from the sword hilt to the seamstress, and to the writer he had given his sapphire from one of his eyes, and to this little match girl, now the happy prince is giving his another sapphire from his another eyes. Okay, now the prince said, Swallow, swallow, little swallow, do as I command you. So now the swallow plucked out the prince's other eye and darted down with it. So he swooped past the match girl. He went at the match girl, students, and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hand. Okay, students. So what happened now? As that sapphire had been on the palm of the little match girl, what a lovely bit of glass, she said, students. Okay, and she ran home laughing, and she became so happy. And then the swallow came back to the prince, and he said, Now, prince, you are completely blind. So I will stay with you always. I will help you. But the prince says, No, now you must go away to Egypt. No, but the swallow said, No, I will always stay with you. And he slept at the feet of the prince, students. Now, as they have the great attachment with each other, Now the next day he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him the stories what he had seen in the strange hands. Now the prince again said, "Swallow, swallow, little swallow, you tell me the marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything, sufferings of men and women. There is no mystery so as great as misery. So fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there." Now again, students, the swallow flew over the great city, saw the rich people were making merry, making happy events, and in their beautiful houses, and the beggars were sitting in the gates. Okay, he flew in the dark lanes also, and saw the faces of children, okay, starving children, looking out lifelessly at the black streets. Under the archway of the bridge, the two little boys were lying on each other's arm to try to keep themselves warm, as they do not have money. They says, "How hungry we are! We must lie here," shouted the watchman on them. So whole story have been told by the swallow to the prince, beta. So what happened? Again, the swallow flew back and told the prince what he had seen. Now the prince said, "Now let us see, swallow. I am covered with fine gold. So you must take off leaf by leaf and give it to the poor, okay, children. Living away, think the gold can make them happy." Okay, so leaf after leaf, students, fine gold swallow picked off till the happy prince looked like dull and grey. Okay, and leaf after leaf of the fine gold brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier as they got the money by selling that gold, students. And they laughed and they played in the street. And if we have bread now, they cried, they got the food to eat now. The snow became frost, okay, as those were the winter days. And the streets looked like as they were made of silver, as it was spread up by snow. Everybody went into the forest to get them warm, and the little boys wore the scarlet caps and skated on the ice now. And the poor little swallow grew colder and colder better. And he could not leave the prince as he loved him too well. Okay, students. So he picked up the crumbs outside the baker's door, and the baker was not looking over there. So he tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings, but at last he knew that he was going to die now because of the severe cold. So he had just enough strength to put up to the prince's shoulder once more, students. So what he said, "Goodbye, prince," he murmured. Okay, he whispered, "Will you let me kiss your hand?" So it was the end of the swallow, students, as he was unable, okay, to survive over there. So the prince said, "Oh, I'm glad with that you are going to Egypt at last. I'm so happy, swallow. You have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you. It is not to Egypt that I am going," said the swallow. "I am going to the house of death, prince, and death is brother of sleep, is he not?" So the swallow kissed the prince's lips and fell down dead at the feet of the prince, students. Okay, as he loved the happy prince very much because of his kindness and generosity. At that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue as something had broken, students. The fact was that leaden heart of the screen had snapped right into two. Okay, it certainly was dreadful hard frost, students. And early morning, what happened now? The snakes, the king's statue has been also cracked, students, and it was a frost. Okay, completely dreadful hard frost. So next morning, what happened, students? The mayor was working in the square below, complying with the town councillor, students. Okay, so the mayor and his councillors passed the column up at the statue, and they say he said, "Dear me, how shabby the happy prince looks now," because the gold cover had been removed from his body. So councillors also says, "Oh, really, how shabby it looks." Okay, so the mayor agreed that the ruby has fallen out of his sword, eyes were also gone, and the gold on his body is also not there. In fact, he is better than a beggar now. Okay, students. So little beggar than a beggar. The councillors are also agree with him. So see now, the dead bird is also fallen at his feet. Mayor also continued with that. So we must really issue the proclamation that birds are not allowed to die here. The town clerk made a note for the suggestion, students, over here. And they pulled out the statue of Happy Prince from there. He is no longer beautiful and he is no longer useful, students. So they melted that statue in the furnace. Okay, and what a strange thing, said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. Okay, and they had this broken lead heart will melt into the furnace now, and we must throw it away. They threw it away on the dust heap where the dead swallow was lying, students. Okay, it's the end of the story. And see here, bring me the two most precious things in the city, said the god to the one of his angels. So the angel brought the leaden heart of the prince and the dead bird. So God answered to his angels, oh really, you have rightly chosen. Okay, for in my garden's paradise, this little bird sing for even more, and in my city of gold, the happy prince shall praise me. And they at last they got the place in the heaven. That's all about this lesson, students. Okay.